against the background of all the fuse that is going on in the world about the rights of the black people. I wanna remember about the guys who are most offended by it. We're talking about the Indian people from whom everything was taken away. First, they were defeated, then systematically forced out of their territories and finally drunk and locked in reservations. We will live a day in the life of Indians of the times of the decline of the Native American era. It will be very interesting and most importantly instructive and will help us to understand everything our guest Henry. It's true that it's exclusively American name. In his native Cherokee tribe, the guy's name is Kanato. The Indian civilization lived by its own rules and gave birth to a truly unique culture that spread from tribe to tribe. The guys' names were elaborate and each one carried a specific meaning. The name Kanato translates to a lucky hunter. Do you feel like there is something wrong with that? After all, in movies and books you see names like the Seeing Eye, Beautiful Doe and White Axis. Those names are what sit in the heads of the vast majority of people. The problem is that Americans have been more busy killing Indians than learning about their culture. And the traditions of name formation are only kept by the Indian themselves are not in all tribes. That's how bad things are in Indian studies. But back to Henry. We'll call him that because it's 1836 and he lives in Alabama near the Americans. Henry lives in a small community under martial law. We'll talk about him later, but for now, let's take a closer look at tribal life. Here prejudice is not wrong. Indians lived in their homes. In the north, they did build an economical wigwam of branches and hides in the shape of a dome. However, the Iroquois tribe favored huge wooden houses. Like the Vikings, the boys built a large one-story barracks that housed several families. The New Mexico Indians, on the other hand, favored dwellings made of clay, and the Cherokees mostly lived in houses made of thatch and straw, bound together with plaster. Often clay or other similar materials were used for walls. All in all, it made a pretty cozy thing, but dark, for there were no windows and light came either from an open door or from a fire built inside. There are about 20 families living in Henry's village, and it's considered average. And the tribe also has a hectares of fertile land. Sometimes they planted something on it, but most of it was idle. This was one of the reasons for the final survival of the Indians by the Americans. They wanted to get their hands on the vast lands and make money from them. Upon landing in America and getting to know the Indians, Columbus wrote that they were beautiful, skillful and kind people. The navigator noted the beauty of the dwellings and the Indians, not bad fishing skills and culture. And the next day he wrote that 50 soldiers were enough to subdue the Indians and make them do whatever the Europeans wanted. Columbus argued this by brilliantly explaining that the natives let them go wherever they wanted and would give them anything you asked of them. Roughly speaking, the European realized that simple-minded Indians can be exploited. That's where the funny story started. Textbooks don't like to mention that during the second campaign, Columbus brought to America 1,500 armed men, and all the navigator did was go through villages and seize gold at gunpoint. As he embarked on a full-scale expansion of the continent, the situation worsened. But even in 1835, where our Henry lives, didn't stabilize. Every year the US government issued new laws that restricted the rights of Indians and took away their territories, and at the same time drank the Indians. Before we tell this story, let's dispel another myth. American science likes to say that Indians were suddenly predisposed to alcoholism. And it's not their fault, but it's lie. There have been tons of studies that prove that alcohol affects the Indian body just as much as it does the European body. Indians have been drinking alcohol since antiquity, but their corn drinks were no stronger than wine. And the Europeans brought rum and whiskey. At first it was all fair and harmless. The Native Americans didn't mind the new fire water. The Europeans traded alcohol with the Indians, exchanging it for gold, jewelry and territory. But then the Europeans realized that the Indians didn't know the quality of alcohol. So the traders of low quality alcohol, offering it at cheap prices, came in waves to the tribes. And the poor Indians agreed to any deals, which again played a cruel joke on them. The colonies began to put poisons in the alcohol, and there are cases when whole tribes were destroyed, and the survivors of teetotalers physically couldn't fight back Europeans. More elegant deeds were also practiced. The Americans sent a trader to an Indian tribe who offered whiskey at insanely low prices, often even for free. The good trader would throw a party in the tribe, and toward nightfall, a punitive squad would arrive on the scene. He would slaughter the drunken Indians, make a report that the tribe had died as a result of the epidemic and the territory could now be taken. Despite the barbarity of the method, it was widely used even after US independence and even after the Civil War. Often Indians began to drink out of sheer desperations, because the Americans refused to trade with them. By this time, it had gotten to the point of abuse. In 1832, ostensibly to protect the Indians, the US government passed a law prohibiting the sale of alcohol to them, but the law only applied to white territories. The US prohibited Indians from buying quality liquor, and they could only drink what was brought to the reservations. There is stale alcohol that burned out their insides, and in 1832 it resulted in a crazy adventure that went down in history as a Great Indians Removal. The US government got the idea to liberate the beautiful Indian territories in return for giving them other territories. On paper, everything looked relatively fair. The law explained that the tribes scattered around the country were hindering development and offered the Indians to move to their own counties with full moral and material compensation. The law described, for example, that if an Indian had a good house but no farm of his own and nothing around, everything was returned in money, and for a year they would pay an allowance and give military protection. But what really happened? The Indians were first cheated out of money by dead lands, and then the signatures were forged and the law was ratified without their consent. The Indians tried to contest this fact, but were forced to relocate at the point of a revolver. Hundreds of Indians were driven thousands of miles on foot by soldiers. The journey went down in history as a road of tears, with disease, harsh conditions, and skirmishes killing a quarter of the people in each tribe, and the rest were sent to a reservation in Oklahoma. Imagine Henry's feelings as he watched his people killed, drunk, betrayed, and driven like cattle wherever they wanted. Guys, I recommend to watch other videos of ours about what if the USSR hadn't collapsed. Like this video, subscribe this channel, and we'll see you in the next video.